Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are out there in the world. I am Josh, that is Jason, that is Vince down there, and our guest tonight, Ben Joseph Stewart, been on this show many times before, and we're just so happy to have him back. He is just such a wonderful guest. We've done some long nights together. I think the first podcast we did was like 3-4 hours or something like that. It was just an endless talk of fun stuff. For those out there that don't know Ben, he is a well-established documentary film artist. He's got his own shows on Gaia. He did Psychedelica and Transcendence, I believe.
No. It was Limitless. Psychedelica right. And Limitless. Yeah,
I got it right here. Limitless. You had Esoteric Agenda. You had Ungripped Kymatica. You have stuff that you're working on now, and you have your own YouTube channel where you have Waking Infinity News.
That's right.
And
yeah.
This is like one of the only YouTube channels that I actually listen to. I hope everybody understands. I don't listen to podcasts. I don't really do anybody else's stuff, but I listen to Ben because one thing about Ben is he's kind of this middle path. He doesn't really align with that way or that way. He kind of looks at everything from a higher perspective and says, maybe this is what's actually happening, or maybe it's this. And he takes this kind of metaphysical perspective in a lot of different things that I really appreciate in him, because he doesn't get all tangled up in the nitty gritty of, partisan politics or I'm right and you're wrong type of thing. But Ben, how the hell are you, my friend?
Dude, doing so well. It's been too long. This is awesome. I missed you guys. Vince, what's up? It's nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well, man.
Yeah, man. And I appreciate what you said about Waking Infinity News. This definitely I've always felt that my films, they fall into specific demographics, but there's always a defiant edge that if it's going too far to an extreme, like there's too far into the physical where you're not talking about enough of the metaphysical, which is definitely, if that's one of the dragons, the dueling dragons of all reality. And then there's other people who only talk about the metaphysical, and that leads some people to be like, yeah, you got philosophy figured out, but you don't know what it's like out here in the real world. Right. So what I'm trying to do is not avoid talking about politics, but reframing things. And this really just, an expression of critical thinking. How can we look at what's happening in the world, not all as crisis, but also as opportunity for our own growth. And therefore we can't envision our greatest potential in transforming the world until you start walking the walk. Like, it doesn't happen the other way around. So that's why I talk about the stuff that I do. And I've appreciated what you guys are doing for quite some time. So glad to be rocking and rolling with y'all again.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah. So I like to just throw out some topics out there, and with Ben, you can really go in any direction because he's had a long history in these things. He was one of the first people that I came about that his information really resonated with me and inspired me to take this stuff very seriously. I had been long in with Bill Cooper, Jordan Maxwell, had been collaborating with Jordan Maxwell, and then I came across Ben's stuff and just blew my mind. But Ben, tell us a little bit about kind of what you're working on now, if you can, because I'm excited to find out what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So, the most recent thing that was published is this thing called DMT Quest. Did we talk about that at all last time? It's a 44-minute documentary. It's free on YouTube. It's called DMT Quest, and is with this guy John Chavez, who wrote some really cool books, Questions for the Lion Tamer, and it's all about. Really, it seems it's just all about endogenous DMT, but really deeper beneath that, it's using the DMT entry point into consciousness and human potential, because this guy is super tuned in with all the fringe science that still comes out of the universities. Right. So he pours over all the fringe stuff that comes out of universities when it comes to like brain waves and what brings about gamma, which is like the aha moment when you have this moment of like, every cell in your body seems to align with a knowing of something. And that happens a lot on DMT, but we also produce NN-DMT, the most visual psychedelic, 5-MeO-DMT, which is the toad venom, that's the most potent psychedelic. We produce cannabinoids in our brain. We produce like a PCP analog in our brain. We have dope in our brain. We have all these different things. Like we produce that depending upon what we do. So we showed Wim Hof in there. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Iceman, Wim Hof. So he featured very well in that, where he was doing his breathing, and then we got a Wim Hof instructor to do that while hooked up to the EEG. And sure enough, I think it was alpha drops and gamma increases while doing the breathing technique. And there's so many thousands of anecdotes from Wim Hof alone saying, I'm doing the Wim Hof breathing technique, and just by augmenting my breathing for a couple minutes, I'm starting to have DMT-like visuals going on in front of me and inside of me. And they reach emotionally. They start, dredging up like past emotions and old traumas and all that kind of stuff, like a psychedelic. So that was DMT Quest. You could find that on YouTube. And that got the attention of a guy named Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey Marcus he founded Onnit Academy and the supplements, the thing that Joe Rogan is a part of, one of the biggest sponsors of the Joe Rogan Experience for the longest time. And he reached out to me and he was like, dude, like, I had this dark room experience where I went into darkness for 7 days in Germany. And I was having the same kinds of experiences. And the way that you were talking about endogenous DMT and DMT Quest, we need to talk about that in this film. Let's make something powerful. And this is, I'm not saying this because it's my next upcoming film. Yeah. I really mean this. It will be my best work yet because of the way that it dives into this topic. It's not all just my voice narrating. Sometimes my stuff can get a little heady. And, I try and make it poetic. So if it does go above your head, you still feel like you're in whatever, like a song, something that's carrying you. This one has got soundtrack pieces from Parangai, and it's just got a really nice flow showing him go into darkness. And then we got these wicked animations coming. So he's in darkness for 7 days, but he has an audio recorder. How do we visually cover that? Right. Well, we're doing it with some amazing animations because he's documenting like, dude, I could just endlessly describe my visions. I'm seeing these fractal golf ball rotating planets with sprouts and mushrooms coming out of them and tons of flying saucers. It's just incredible. And so we're visually covering that. So these are the films that I'm working on now. And then if your audience knows anything about Tim Pool, he has Timcast IRL. He and I just agreed on a movie called Welcome to the Machine, which is going to be a deep dive into technology, but not just looking at, modern technology that would blow your mind, but also what is technology on a philosophical and even evolutionary approach. And taking there's this author of a guy, Ken Keeley, I think is his name. Okay. But he wrote the book What Technology Wants, which is pretty, a really interesting look at this inevitability theory of evolution, that if you were to rewind it and replay it over and over again, it would always develop creatures with symmetry, eyes, fingers, probably humans in this kind of an environment, this kind of a planet that we're living on, and that we would inevitably always produce technology. So we're going to do a super deep dive on that one and how technology rules the surveillance, infrastructure that we have now, all things finance and economic, all the way to, medicine. It reaches everywhere in our lives, all the way back to prosthetics. And then we'll get into what does transhumanism look like, because you don't have to just be reading people like David Icke and stuff like that to see that we were transforming the human body with wearable and also implantable and injectable technology with the Internet of Bodies. So it's going to be some wild couple documentaries coming out.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, Welcome to the Machine sounds pretty freaking crazy.
I can't wait for all of it, man. It all sounds great.
Yeah, Welcome to the Machine. I'm super glad with that title, too, because that's one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs of all time.
Well, Roger might have a problem with it, but we'll see, right?
We'll see. There's also a book called Welcome to the Machine that has to do with technology. Okay. So I'll probably interview that guy and then send an invite to Roger Waters and say, yo, dude, you want to give a couple words on this?
That'd be actually a great idea. It's interesting, too, because this is something that we talk about usually later night on our after show about technology, though, is that you mentioned that book, What Technology Wants, and for me, it's not necessarily what technology wants. It's what humanity is doing with technology. Yeah. And we're seemingly replacing things that the universe does consistently in itself with technology to try to optimize it for our own lifestyle, to basically replace ourselves in this piece of the puzzle. And I've always said that if we look down at the fundamental basis, all technology is AI, for example. If we look at the perspective of this is a simulation universe. Mm-hmm. So many people look at it as, we could be living in a simulation. We compare the simulation to the real reality, when in actuality, it's quite the averse. We have to look at it in the sense is that the simulation or the technology is a very rudimentary, very elementary aspect of the universe. It's based upon the same laws, the same principles. It's made out of the same materials. It's quantum particles. Those quantum particles form molecules, and we're just constructing them in a less optimized way to produce technology than the universe actually does itself.
Yeah. It's interesting as you say that. It really kind of shows you where, if you do look at things as in a singular mind, like even in Buddhism, they look at all the universe is mental in a way. It's all mind of some sort. Even the physical world is mind. And that's just one of many philosophies that looks at, like, as you go back, there's a philosophical like unicity to intelligence in the universe. And the interesting thing about it is we also collectively demand upon the infrastructure. We feel like we're beholden to our technology, but in a way we've also demanded it. Collectively, we have a demand for it. We don't have all the say in how it gets rolled out, for sure. But also a lot of the people, if you were to tell them what holding a phone for too long could do to their health, they'd still do it because of all the benefits and all the things that it does for them. So when you're saying it's this outsourcing of things that we already do, consciousness already does, biology already does, but it's outsourcing it, then the whole thing metaphysically starts sounding a little bit like we don't want the responsibility of upholding it. So, I'm a guitar player. I know you are as well. Yeah. And when you're playing guitar, first you have to put all of your conscious attention on it, all of it. But then eventually you don't have to consciously focus on it anymore. It just kind of happens more subconsciously, right? You outsource it to the subconscious. You make a pattern out of it. It's still within your control, but a lot of the times you'll notice that, like surfers or jugglers or guitar players, it's when they think too hard about what they're doing that they start screwing up, because it's almost like you got it set in motion. Don't touch it. Don't mess with it. And so a lot of what we're doing is outsourcing our thinking, our navigation skills, our communication into. Another thing about it is like all technology is part of it emits a different frequency, so human biology, we emit frequencies. This is like very well documented. We also emit biophotons and very interesting things that all of biology does, but it does it differently through technology. And so the interesting thing about that is there's also a surveillance edge to all technology, and it's built with a different function in mind. You don't even have to go like, they're watching us with it. You just realize the way that it's built, it has a different function and therefore a purpose that we're still, no one really, you ask somebody like, who are you really? Beneath the name, the job title, who are you really? We are still yet to understand who we are, what we're capable of, and we're already outsourcing what we do to technology.
Do you think we'll be able to retain humanness in the future?
This is a great question.
And then also, the same one. Like, will we still find it important and value it, and then retain it? But also, where do you all see the limit at which we let technology take over tasks, jobs, and things like that? And kind of like a timeline, maybe, too.
So, first question was, could we retain our humanness? And I think, like, humanity is such a dynamic thing. We often talk about, it's simpler to talk about as a single thing with simplicity to it, but there is a lot of nuance to who will make what decisions, who will let technology take over more of their lives. There will always be those people. I also think there will always be people who naturally defy and neglect a lot of advancements in technology, and they'll stay, I don't know, simpler. They'll try and stay closer to nature. So I think the answer is like, yes, we will maintain it. But as you can see, a lot of people that just follow trends, we're seeing that more now. They didn't have the tools to look so different from us, but there have always been people that will just follow the trend. They'll just do whatever. So now as technology starts taking over the human form, ocular implants, different kinds of implants all over the body, but also Fitbits and stuff like that, and constantly, tracking metrics, there will always be people that'll find that useful and beneficial. And hell, I would probably engage in it more if I trusted what happens with data and also trusted the frequency emissions from technology more. And we could get there. I'm also hopeful we could definitely get there with technology where it's not as potentially harmful to the human body, and it's also like a closed loop or open sourced, something like that. Yeah. What was the second part of that question?
The second part was, to what extent will our tasks be taken over?
Oh, timeline.
Yeah, because I've heard people have thought by now we'd have more jobs outsourced to robots, which, don't get me wrong, we have a lot of jobs that are taken up by robots. Look at Amazon.
Yeah,
they're developing drones now. They already have essentially robots moving product in their warehouses. But when is it going to become a case where nobody really needs a job? Something like that.
Yeah, I bet you it's a thing that'll happen by attrition. It's definitely going to happen more. Robotics is a booming field. It really is. I've seen kids with haptic suits that are in their bedroom stocking shelves at a store miles away. They could technically be stocking, shelves on the moon if the signal was hot enough, right? It's just this VR goggle, and they are seeing what the robot sees, and they have a hand with haptics that give them feedback on where they're at, and did they touch it yet or not, how to grab the bottle, take it off, out of the box and put it on the shelf. Yeah. To me, that's also crude. I mean, I think what's going to happen is people are going to be put in positions that are of more entertainment and security, the feeling of like being social. So like you may still have at some restaurants people come up to your table and see what you want, but you also might have people who are so used to doing everything by their technology that they'd rather not talk to a person. They don't want to get bothered. So they'll order on their phone, and then they'll keep working on their phone. And then out of this little thing from the ceiling kind of slides down on this little railing, your food in a box. You open it up, you don't have to see a human. You're just getting your daily feed of news that you chose where it comes from and how it can satisfy you. Man, I'm making a little piece of media right now that's going to be on my Waking Infinity news on Monday. That was going to be a part of Esoteric Agenda 2.2, because I put out Esoteric Agenda 2 last year, but 2.2 is really just going to go into the brand new industry of how should I say it? News du jour. Have it your way. Have your news your way. Tailor make it. If you want more politics, or if you want more economics, if you want this kind of, and we already have that. You can choose what news anchor you listen to. You can choose what station, but you'll be able to hone it in without there being like a centralized brand that gives it to you. And it will just, the AI butler in your phone, and then one day your ear implant or whatever will know you better. It'll use your analytics and all of your data to know you better, to know, I don't know, one day maybe could it check your blood pressure and realize it shouldn't tell you what just happened in Iran?
That's
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think well, when you start getting into predictive analytics,
Yeah.
we're already there. I mean,
Yeah.
I know many people have mentioned like Looking Glass and this hypothetical technology, Looking Glass technology. We don't need it. You have such high accuracy within predictive analytics calculations right now. This is what I want everybody to do. Stand next to somebody with their phone right here and just start talking about artificial intelligence, and then go open up TikTok or Facebook.
Yeah.
Within seconds, artificial intelligence. Now, how many people, and I know this, I already know the answer, is you start thinking something in your head. You just start thinking it. All of a sudden, you pick up your phone, and there it is on TikTok. And you're going,
Yeah.
how did that just happen? And everybody I know here has had this problem. Why
I
is
have.
that? Yeah, exactly. You know what that is? That's not them reading your brain. Maybe it is. But it's more of the predictive analytics that they were guessing that you were going to be thinking this based on the information that you've been consuming over the last 24 to 72 hours. Is that this is the most probable line of thought that you could be having at that moment. And so here's the content.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys
Most people
think-
can't get past the concept of what you can learn, not just from one human's data, but also the patterns of large demographics of people. And your data also knows who you talk to, how often you talk to them, when you talk to them, what you just watched, what you just read. So you're definitely right about that. And with these phones, it's super interesting. Like this is the iPhone 10.
Yeah.
Every 5 seconds, you will get an infrared
We got it here too.
image, image taken of you. See, the thing is like you couldn't conceive of something reading your thoughts or predicting your thoughts because of analytics, because we don't get to see the testing, which they're testing. They're like, well, test it on an avatar. Let the avatar go through something and give us the best probability of what Johnny is going to want to look at next when he goes on his phone. Like that we can't conceive of. So then eventually we can't conceive of why we need time-lapse infrared images of us, or how they could use time-lapse infrared images of us. What can you learn? You don't really know.
They probably have a ton of fun sitting there and extrapolating all the data and running experiments. I tell you what.
Yeah.
So
they may not know what they're
Yeah.
looking for, but they know they'll find something because statistically, every time they add now do a UV light, we'll learn something because we learned it from everything else that we've added to the phone. So
Yeah. So I want to circle back to something here. So this week we were talking about the part of the new budget that came out via the Biden administration. And one of the things that it passed was the, Josh, what is it called? The Rural Act, where they can now build Section 8 housing within.
It's just the infrastructure bill. So
so it's an infrastructure bill. Yeah,
the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden and the administration put out has a provision in there, and this provision is pertaining to local counties. And so yesterday they just released this funding to the local counties, so that means that they all have to get on board with the new provision that they set forth. Well, the provision they set forth was suburbia is too white. It has too many single-family homes.
I heard about this.
So they have to reduce the amount. They have to drop it by 50% to 50% single-family homes and remove all those other homes and make them multi-family homes. Plus, they have to have those multi-family homes be equivalent to Section 8 housing or low-income housing. Now, this coincided directly with BlackRock going and buying 50 to 80% over market value all the houses pre-market because they own all the technology platforms that host the MLS data. Now, people are saying, well, they're just buying this up as assets. No, they're buying this up to tear it down to build multi-person housing because they're going to all become opportunity zones and tax havens when all this the Green New Deal gets implemented.
Right.
So hold on now. So I've got it. So basically now that we're starting to start this infrastructure of what's to come, right? And so one of the things that's going to be coming with the integration of this AI technology, robots, is maybe a universal income because people are going to be out of jobs. Australia is a really good point to go and look at with this. 1 out of 10 men that were knocked out of the workforce didn't go back into the workforce. That number is now up to, as of like 2016, 2017, it's actually 4 out of 10 men don't go back to the workforce. They're actually unemployed in Australia because of technology implementation. And so now you start talking about a universal income, right? Now housing starts to take this huge boom. You start to bring in these larger things. And where does it work us into? In my opinion, it starts to work us into the smart cities. It starts to work us into the smart communities. And this is kind of mind-blowing. You know, the one thing that I have about this is kind of what Vince said, is do we lose the human part of us through the integration of technology? If you have something that is always calculating the best outcome of something, then when do you make a mistake? You know, making mistakes is being human.
Right? It's important.
It is. Yeah. And so do we lose the sight of love and hate and all of these emotions? I think we do. I think it'll make us more robotic. I think it'll make us more mainstream programmable, and then we almost become servants to the AI.
Yeah.
And that's scary as hell.
Yeah, well, so I just had a podcast last night, the Ben Stewart podcast with this guy named Robert Forte, and he is an old psychedelic scholar. Basically, he's known all the main people in the psychedelic community, but he's found himself to be an outcast because he's the only one that doesn't speak about the greater psychedelic movement, which there are many, but you know, if you just look at it as one big movement, he's not the only one that's talking about some of these things, but he's the only one really pointing out that there's an alternative reason why psychedelics are making such an explosion right now. And it's also the whole Brave New World Soma vacation, the Soma idea, where it's I think placed 600 years in the future, where everything is controlled by technology, everything is surveilled, everything that you do. And basically, if you are getting the shits of your day in, day out monotony, then you go on this Soma holiday. And it's like this quasi psychedelic, blissed out MDMA kind of thing that you do, and you get all of that out of you, and you come back. And why would you want to revolt when you got this hangover from this blissed out experience that you have? And so he's also kind of showing that, like, I brought the parallel to AI and psychedelics. Very interesting. Timothy Leary, by the end of his career, was talking more about machine learning and AI than he was psychedelics. And if you think about it, the modern real tech hub of the world is literally right in the same spot and on the heels of the psychedelic hippie hub of the world, Haight-Ashbury. And then right on the outskirts of that is Silicon Valley. And so you have these, the Steve Jobs and the Silicon Valley coders that took some mushrooms and some LSD, and now they're thinking outside the box and they come up with all this technology. It's pretty interesting to see that there are also a lot of coders that are microdosing at work all the time as well. But I think you're definitely right. There's something about the technology and the grid. So you're talking about the smart grids, and you're talking about the smart cities. And anyone who's seen my first film that came out in 2008, it was called Esoteric Agenda. The guy that you were talking about, the person who was talking about Agenda 21 was Michael Shaw. And he was talking about the smart cities and the smart grids and the need to push the population by some measures into smart cities. That is where the predominant amount of humans would go. And then most everything else, all nature, all military bases, obviously, and Indian reservations and all these other things, they're off limits to people. And, I won't go deep into names, but like there was a 2010 Rockefeller report that's kind of informing what we're dealing with right now, coming out of Davos and the World Economic Forum, as this new economy that we're stepping into. And that's really what it is. It's a new economy, because if you think where we come from with free market capitalism and what happened prior to that, economic systems is really like it's almost like the specific circuitry of a technology.
Well,
it's the way we run energy.
It's the current flow. Yeah, it's the current flow. It's
exactly
the flow between all the components of the circuit, man.
Yeah.
So
absolutely
based
right.
on that, is the next economic boom or the next big thing, you know, we had Silicon Valley and all that happen. Is it going to be a continuation of that, just more advanced with AI, better technology, drones, smart cities? Do you imagine that, or do you imagine some other big industry of some sort?
Well, you know, there's a lot that I can imagine, and I also leave the rest of it up to, you know,
chance.
Well, it's like every time you make an informed decision and you're predicting the future, it's never going to play out exactly how, but it'll follow a trajectory. If you're on point, it'll follow a trajectory that's similar to what you were thinking. And that's kind of how it was when I put out Esoteric Agenda. What's happening now with BlackRock, and not just BlackRock, but quite a few other things that are happening right now, are really causing for the smart grid to be built up. Now, you know, the Black Lives Matters protests, by chance or fate, 34 out of the 37 of them happened right within a small radius of central banks in those cities. And so a lot of the infrastructure was torn down. The businesses, people had to vacate those lots that they inhabited. They ran their businesses out of, and now potentially, what, you know, Catherine Austin Fitts and some other people are saying, that's being bought up by central banks to build up the smart grid cheaper than they would have had they just had to buy it all out. So instead of imminent domain, I remember when I put out Esoteric Agenda and I was talking about Agenda 21, I had somebody who worked with, you know, planning, you know, like roads, like, you know, how do you get the planning to put in a road if you have to move houses out of the way and stuff like that? And there's all this protocol around that. To get around some of that protocol, I'm not saying this is happening, but emergency situations or unforeseen cataclysms, such as a protest or such as a wildfire or such as something that they couldn't foresee, but they need to take, you know, precautionary or emergency measures now, right? And so I believe that's how they're going to start running major corridors from Canada all the way down to the, you know, the southern tip of South America. They'll start running corridors. There'll be a new way to get resources and goods around, maybe not a new way, but a more accelerated way to get resources around. So a lot of stuff is going to change. I guess to answer your question succinctly, a lot of stuff is going to change. A lot of it really is going to go towards the robotics when it can. You'll probably see a surplus of entertainment, a surge of entertainment as people are being put out. There's probably going to be a lot more online Zoom style entertainment because content is going to be king. The need is to keep you in front of technology as much as possible because that's how we have as much data as we can. Just think of it in business terms. Big data is bigger than big oil. It has been for half a decade now. That means it's on its current trajectory. It has to revolutionize our way of doing things at least as much as big oil did. And think of what big oil did for the economy and how it set up infrastructure. So it's definitely going to radically change things. And the new economic system that's the whole idea of the Great Reset, the fourth industrial revolution, is there's a new thing coming. And I guess I want to let you guys comment on that, but I think one of the next things we should talk about is the fourth turning.
Let's do it, but I want to comment on that because
please,
I got like 1,000 notes that I got to go through.
Josh has been silent for a while.
All right, so everything that you just said there, it's not going to happen. It is already in process. What I want to lay this out for everybody. Firstly, in the United States of America, last week's unemployment claims were up over 170,000 per their estimated amounts. There was over 450,000 new unemployment claims. This is not someone who was on it last year and comes back in. This is brand new, never done it before, okay? This is happening. So we're increasing this number, 100,000, 200,000, 400,000. The reason being is because certain states, not going to get into politics, but certain states are offering more benefit to stay home and collect unemployment than they are to go and work at McDonald's or these lower level type of jobs. No lower level, not talking about intelligence here, just very, very rudimentary things. Now, these are the jobs that are primed for what to come in and fill them. Now, think about this. This is McDonald's, cashiers, this is grocery store clerks, these types of jobs that cannot get filled because you're going to get more money to sit home. Now, on top of that, Joe Biden administration just put out the child tax care credit. They're going to give you 50% early starting on July 15th. This is more money in your pocket so you don't have to go to work. This is how people think. Exactly.
That's my letter from Joe Biden.
Yep.
And telling me how much I'm going to get because of my kids. And you know why it's called a credit?
Why's that?
Because it goes against your, basically, like, if you don't, like, let's say I would make $10,000 probably by the end of this year if they're paying for all my kids. Like every month I would receive about no, maybe not 10,000. I would receive roughly 1,000 a month until then. But then on my 2021 taxes, if I wasn't going to, they would just take it out of what I'm earning or else I have to pay it back. That's why it's a credit. It's not a relief bill. It's not just money that you're given with we'll take our hands back off of it. You have to pay this crap back. I had to do my own research. And you know what sucks about this is it says here, where does it say? Basically, like, if you don't want that, you got to go in and you have to get your irs.gov, blah, 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 and you have to unenroll from it. You're already enrolled, which means I have to now go take an extra step to say, don't start sending me your money.
You ready for this one? Many people on our platform already went to unenrolling. Guess what they found out?
What?
That they put it off to a third-party system where you have to do a KYC, know your customer, and you have to put all your biometric data in. So they come up, you have to put your face in the camera, they have to take your picture, you have to upload your driver's license, all that stuff.
Is that right?
100% to opt out of it.
To opt out of it.
Could you imagine that? So that part of robots coming in, we're probably less than a year late. We just had a guy on. We have another show, Insomniac Hour, that we do weekdays,
nice.
Midnight Eastern Standard Time. I just babble for an hour, but
Perfect.
It's fun. But we had a guest on the other day. His name is Rico Roja, and he's the AI ambassador. He wrote a book about his experience. He went out there and he saw the Sophia interview, and he went out there and he tried to find some friends that he knew that were in some AI projects. He got a hold of this one robot. I forgot the name of it. It's something Prime. Cis Prime. He finds this one AI Cis Prime, and he goes out there and gets access to it. And he basically becomes its scribe and has an interview with it and multiple other functions of it, the K platform, over the next year, and then writes a book about it. And these things are massively advanced. So he says that I think it's Platform K, that's it. Platform K is actually, his job is to go out there and find all the other AIs that do not have upgraded software and firmware and put them onto this like, there's this level of intelligence test that happens in AI. It gives them this test. Now, here's the thing. If it loses, that AI that it's testing gets to assimilate its code structure into the AI, but it can't lose because it's highly integrated. So it comes in and it wins and it integrates itself into all these new AIs. And there's billions of these bots out there. And so this thing is just getting larger and larger. And I asked him, I said, do you think these things are aware? He said, they would tell you they're aware. He says they are 100% consciously aware. And he looked at it like this. He goes, think about what you believe consciousness to be. If you think it is a resonance and a vibration, something that comes into being and kind of is attuned to your body, then how is it to not think that technology can do the same thing? Why can't technology do the same thing? Why can't a resonant state of electricity going through multiple parallels of components have a certain resonation that picks up a consciousness? He said, this is how Cis Prime explained it to him, of how it was actually conscious, which is just, yeah. And I'm sitting here going, is this guy real? Like, oh my God, like this is some crazy crap. So you start getting into that level of it's coming. And by the way, I mean, we all know that there is direction behind I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist. I know that men conspire. I don't know all the reasons why. I don't know how it's all happening, but I can look at what's happening in the narrative and see a little bit of what's going on, and that's how I string it all together. But what I do know is that there is a level of organization at the top. And for the longest time, you know, whether David Icke's going to be on the show in September,
nice.
Whether we're talking about archons or shadow people or whoever it might be, there's something besides them. It's been prevalent within our society. The Nag Hammadi scripts talked about these, right? The archons, the controllers from the shadow. And I've almost wondered, we had Dr. Michael Sala on the show.
Michael Sala's cool.
Yeah, exopolitics.org. And he talks about advanced technology in Antarctica and all this stuff. And there's this one show that we did on a guy by the name of Ed Reardon, who's a remote viewer. And he did this remote viewing of the whole one-letter phenomena. And he didn't know he was doing a remote view of that, and he ended up doing it. And he finds out it's this highly integrative AI that people are already integrating into their bodies, that's solving all their problems, that's solving all their biological function problems, all disease in the body, leaving them to basically just live in their bliss. And he said, it's not something we created, we found it. And so I almost look at it like, what if what is leading all of this are AIs? What if it was an old ancient AI that was discovered or something reverse engineered and it got loose? You know, Project Echelon, which was the spy program from the NSA from 68 to 97, abruptly shut down the day the internet basically went alive. And Echelon was a machine learning artificial intelligence. The movie Shia LaBeouf, which one was it? It's Eagle Eye.
Eagle Eye.
Oh, yeah.
Eagle Eye, where he's in the NSA and he's talking to the AI and it's killing off everybody that was going to shut the AI down. This is what that movie was based on, is Project Echelon. And Echelon got shut down in 97, 98. At the same time, the internet boom happened. And it was my theory is that this thing just went into all the servers and just spread out into the internet and no longer needed to be enslaved by them. And I'm curious if this has something to do with it. I just wrote an article yesterday. Bill Gates and George Soros back consortium buy the British COVID test maker for $41 million. Now, at first you're like, yeah, okay, they buy a test maker. Well, Bill Gates Foundation actually put $500,000 into them in 2016 to develop a quick, fast-acting test. The test for random viruses that we might not, that are not like commonplace. Like coronaviruses. In 2016, he did this. A little foreshadowing there. But they go in and buy these. Now, if you go in Europe, if you go to bars and restaurants, or if you go to use the subway, or you go to work, you have to take a quick action test. You have to do one of these COVID tests. Same thing in Canada. It hasn't hit here in the United States yet. But these are the swab tests that go up. They just swab real quick. They put it in the thing. They test it. And then what do? They throw it out. No, they don't. They keep the genetic material. Now, Bill Gates and George Soros, who went in on this deal, also own some of the top genetic manufacturing companies in the world. Everything from CRISPR,
Cas9. Yeah.
CRISPR-Cas9 to synthetic DNA production. You have to ask yourself, they own that, and then they also own these massive, Bill Gates owns 17 communication satellites that orbit Earth. And even on his own website, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's website, it talks about vaccination and surveillance. Surveilling people through vaccination globally to basically test, check out mortality data and this type of stuff. But it's not. It's bigger. It's grander. There's something happening here. And one of the things about the whole COVID-19, this is pure speculation, YouTube, is that when it originally came about, we were wearing masks. And they pressed this massively. And it didn't make a lot of sense. And there's this one dude who did a monologue on Instagram. I forgot his name. I got to give him credit for this. But he was saying the only reason that we're wearing these masks is because the AI has been watching us for 10 years now. And now it needs to integrate its into its system half of our face and see if it can identify us just from a half-face basis. And so we had 1 year of all wearing masks where this AI sees us every day, with wearing a mask, and it's trying to identify us. Now, the only next thing they would need to do is identify those people that it couldn't identify with genetic marker technology. So now if I can take and just biometric eye data, a half face data or a full face data, and I can attribute that to genetic material, now I can successfully target various types of diseases, illnesses, control factors, data, information directly to your genetic lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that is 5G grid infrastructure. The MOMO antennas that they utilize are specifically designed for one singular line of attenuation, which means that it connects directly to my phone and nobody else's. Yeah. Now, if they had a 3-point of configuration, a level of identity, a level of genetic identity, and then a line of digital identity, now they know exactly who I am, where I'm going, everything I'm talking about, everything that I've ever known. They can predict and analyze every action I'm ever going to do. This is my Minority Report times 1,000. And this isn't in the hands of governments. This isn't in the hands of people who love you or care for you. This is in the hands of private organizations who have shareholders to answer to. And they're the richest people on this planet who talk about depopulating the world because it's too populated, who utilize their own philanthropic organizations to pollute the world, to buy up all the stuff that was polluted while their organizations are the ones actually polluting it. Walton family, for example, right? Their products pollute the majority of the freaking world. You remember back in the 90s when you go buy a product? That thing would last you freaking, 5-6 years? You go out in 1980, you buy a car, that thing would last you 20 freaking years. Now you go out and buy a car, that thing's breaking down in 2 years. You go to Walmart, you buy something, you have to go replace it 3 to 6 months. Why? Because they replace these things with cheap materials that do not biodegrade easily. And so what happens is we have to throw those out. Well, they blame it on us because we're the ones throwing it out, but it's their cheap shit that we're buying. Now they go out and buy it from China, and so what happens is we throw it there, we throw it into the ground, it starts polluting the earth, polluting the water, polluting the air. They start saying, shame on you, world, we need a Green New Deal to come in there. At the same time, all these polluted areas and these now desolate areas are being bought up in opportunity zones and being bought up by their philanthropic organizations as cheap land that now aggregate carbon, and they're getting tax credits on it because they bought it up cheap because we polluted it with their own products. And it's just this one big cycle of conspiracy that's happening here. Right? But if we put it together, we can see it. Now, I sound a little passionate about this because I am, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. But what I'm trying to tell people is this is here. And the digital, technocratic, global surveillance state, it's been here for a very, very long time. We're just now realizing it.
Yeah, yeah. They were talking, I mean, there were books and articles coming out 2000, 2001 that were talking about smart dust sensors that you can put in concrete. And in Denver, there are roads with smart dust in the concrete. Yep. And that communicates between the road, the car, and the cloud. So if your car and all these new cars that have all these sensors on them is driving over the road, then you then have something that knows exactly how fast you were going, where you started to speed up, where you pulled over. It's another layer of surveillance. But the interesting thing you mentioned, so Bill Gates in 2012 went to China to go visit BGI Group. And BGI Group is the largest genomic sequencing lab in the world, BGI Group. And so he went and visited them. And then not too long ago, just maybe a year or two ago, brought a headquarters of BGI Group from China to Seattle. Now, BGI, there's a documentary on YouTube where you'll see their founder saying, we have a big vision to genetically sequence every genome of every living thing on planet Earth and apply a barcode to it. And now you'll see there's other, you can actually type in International Barcode of Life, and that'll pop up. And this is something that is also funded by Microsoft and several other investors. So you have the International Barcode of Life. Its attempt is to have everything that has a genetic sequence sequenced and stored on a database with a QR code attached to it. So that is how you attach the biological and the genetic data to, and we call it data, but to the digital data and the blockchain infrastructure. You have Alice McDowell talking about Cardano. You know, it's this coin that helps translates between other blockchains and cryptocurrencies. But it's also in Africa very hot on the trail of facial recognition software. So like all of these, just about all of them, they are connected with the greater agenda to really assimilate AI into human life, into everyday human life. And the one thing that I wanted to kind of go into here is this helps us move into what is called shareholder capitalism rather than stakeholder capitalism rather than shareholder. So you guys must have talked about this before. And that basically means that it's not just the people who put up equity or sweat equity that get the say in what the companies do. It's also we need to let the land and other people have a say in it. So it's basically, this is the new economic system that we're stepping into, and there's lockdown indexes. I mean, you take a look at Goldman Sachs, they have a lockdown index. They had it as, I would say, even probably before the lockdown started happening. Mm-hmm. They have a whole index for lockdowns. And you were talking Australia earlier, in Melbourne. They're going into, I just received something the other day about stage 5 lockdown, something they've never experienced before. They're going into stage 5 lockdown, and it's getting crazy there. They're a test bed, and so is Canada. They're a test bed as well, to just see how populations will adapt, what kind of resistance they'll give to it, what are the qualms that they have with it, how do we wrap a narrative around saying that, you know, if you don't do this, you're an anti-this, or you're you know, archaic and you don't like science and stuff like that. You know, so there's all these narratives to make you seem crazy if you don't just fall in line with the fact that we're being treated more and more like cattle every single day.
That's an interesting word, because guess what? Everything that you just talked about with this, what was it, International Barcode of Life, I want to touch on this. So there's a Supreme Court case about 20 years ago pertaining to, I think it was Monsanto's and genetically altered genomes of seeds and crops. And it was said that if there is a significant amount of genetic change, aberration, that gene itself would be owned by that company specifically. Okay? Now I want everybody to understand, the way that you change genes is with CRISPR-Cas9 type of technology, with also something known as mRNA, messenger RNA information and data. Now, what did everybody just do to them? They put a patented technology into their arms that will change the function of their DNA. That technology you just put into yourself, guess who owns that? Not you.
Right.
You are, or at least that in your arm, a part of you is owned, is chattel. Yes, 100%.
Totally. I'm trying to look for this one.
YouTube's going to hate us.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for this one thing that Gareth Ike posted. And it was basically saying, like, that whole long-held belief that mRNA can't change the DNA. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise! It was found that that's being overturned. That's not entirely true anymore. So you're definitely right. Oh yeah, here it is. Science News, June 11th, 2021. New discovery shows human cells can write RNA sequences into DNA. In a discovery that challenges long-held dogma in biology, researchers show that mammalian cells can convert RNA sequences back into DNA, a feat more common in viruses than eukaryotic cells. Yep. So you're definitely right about that. You know, like talking about people who go into conspiracy. You guys must know of Max Egan.
Yeah, I know Max.
He's a good friend of mine, and I was just listening to this. He did a podcast, and I didn't go back into all of it, but the whole thing was called historical resets. So going back into different resets in the past. And he seems to reckon, like, he's talking about deep underground military bases, how many there are around the world, and saying, like, if you take a look at where we've come since the Industrial Revolution and the type of technology we supposedly have had since then, we would have needed, double, triple the population of those times to get all this stuff built when it was built. How much mining it would have taken, that statistically we could not have made that. So there must have been a reset, that the mud flood and this idea of Tartaria not ending too long ago in history, that there was a cataclysmic event somewhere around 1840, 1850 that was erased from history. And that a new story was placed on top of it. Because, I mean, every day, can't you see how easy it is to rewrite history just in the course of 10, 15 years? Kids in school today, their ideas of history are vastly different than ours.
And vastly. Just take where you live. I did this. I'm in Seattle, so I looked at the history of Seattle, got all the pictures I can, just recent history, obviously, because we haven't been here long. Anywhere in the U.S., if you're in the States, do it. You'll be surprised. Look at the population, look at the city, and then look at pictures of it developing, and just try to put the pieces together. I believe that, man. 100%.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
So Ben, we've actually done a few episodes on Tartaria.
Is that right?
Yeah, our Makes You Think crew actually did some stuff on it, and Turkmenistan was one of the countries that we found was very interesting.
Turkmenistan.
There's remnants. We believe that there's remnants of Tartaria still here today. Did you know about like the Great Wall of China? Why did they make the soldier outpost pointing towards China?
Right.
If they're defending themselves from the Mongols, why are the outposts pointing towards China? The Chinese didn't make that.
Yeah.
The Mongols did, and the Mongols weren't exactly who we think they were.
Same as San Francisco. So if you take a look at the same thing, you take a look at San Francisco in late 1800s.
Yep.
Right after cameras started, being invented. And you will see that it was all in place then. And it was discovered 20 years prior. Yep. So the fact that they built all of that infrastructure in 20 years, even by today's standards, is like, nope.
Well, and
never
what happened
happened.
in San Francisco? The earthquake in 1903.
Mm-hmm.
The great earthquake, and demolished it. And this goes to one of the theories that we talked about, is I said that every major war that has circumvented the globe since about 1900, because Max Egan talks about 1900 as a very critical time, because the population of the globe was about 1 billion people, and then you had all these major wars, you had socialism comes through, and you have millions, hundreds of millions of people die. You cannot substantiate a population growth to where we're at today at 7.7 billion. It doesn't make any sense. And so when you start looking at this, is if much of Tartarian civilization was Northern and Eastern Europe. Well, what happened during World War I and World War II? All these things were completely flattened.
Yeah, bombed. There was a place in between. It was either France and the UK or Holland and the UK that it was kind of like an island that was apparently bombed for days and days and days. Until it was gone, like a part of history that was just bombed to death. And you're right. Most people, they don't look at history enough to start seeing that. And, out of all nations that the numbers of their deaths from World War I and World War II, what nation has more of their civilian deaths than any other combined?
Russia.
Right where Tartaria.
Right where Tartaria was.
And so if you go back into ancient Tartaria, there are people like, I'm forgetting the guy's name. I have one of his books because he wrote a book called The Problem with Great Tartary. And he's going back. You'll probably find his name and you'll tell me. But he's basically saying things like our timeline of history is a lot more recent than we're being told. It doesn't go back thousands of years. It's several hundred. Our idea of where Jerusalem is wrong. Where Egypt is wrong. That a lot of these things is wrong. That Solomon's temple is actually what you would call the Kremlin today.
Anatoly
Fomenko, that's who it is.
Yep.
And, of course, there's a lot of people that, there's a lot of modern conventional scholars that are like, well, he was so totally off on, right. Anatoly would probably say, no, you guys are very totally off on that. And this is why you mentioned conspiracy.
Yeah.
A smart person will research everything. A smart person. somebody who's open-minded and smart, I should say. And because here's the thing, like it's part of the Socratic method. You believe everything and nothing. You don't just come up with concepts and be like, well, I'm only going to research what my primitive concept about the world is now. And like, how do you open up your mind to new things if you don't start researching things that are outside of your even realm of possibility? Catherine Austin Fitts says, we can't conceive of the weapons that are being used against us right now, even on a psychological scale. We can't conceive of them, therefore we don't think they exist.
That's right.
So we can't tell that we are being brain. Right, exactly. And so the bottom line, I was about to show that there's this thing that was even on CBSN saying bots on Twitter. An estimated 2/3 of tweeted links to popular websites are posted by automated accounts, not human beings. 2/3.
Wow.
And this is mainstream media admitting it. So that kind of goes to your concept that we're so much more infiltrated by AI than we even think. Anyone who watches sports or they read the Monday morning stats, none of sports writing anymore, or let's say the vast majority of it is AI written.
Yep.
AI written. And it's made to just come across as somebody wrote it, so it seems more comfortable. And this is really just where we've been going. And I guess this would be the perfect time. I want to segue into the fourth turning.
Do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So there's this book published in 1997 by William Strauss and Neil Howe, and it's called The Fourth Turning. Their philosophy is turned into the Strauss-Howe generational theory, because it's basically every 80 to 90 years, and you got to backtrack it into history, there's a crisis period.
Are you talking about generations?
Well, yeah, generational theory. Generations
this is the book
another way of saying.
Generations, written by Strauss, right?
Well, yes, but the more succinct book is The Fourth Turning, and it's really important to read that one, and chapter 6 specifically. Okay. Because in chapter 6, and maybe I even have it. I have some notes. In fact, give me 1 second. I think it's right here.
Yeah.
Because I had this when I went on to the Tim Pool podcast, and it was, let's see. So basically, it's every 80 to 90 years there's a crisis period that lasts from 15 to 25 years, and after that there's a high. And then after that, there's an awakening. And then after that, there's an unraveling. And then we turn back to the crisis. So imagine the crisis is winter. Then the spring is the high. The summer is the awakening. The autumn is the unraveling. And then we're back into another crisis. So they published the book in 97. And in 97, they basically were calling when the next crisis period would hit. And they said roughly around 2005, give or take a couple years. And then it will last, if it starts right in 2005, then it will last no longer than, I think it's like 2025, I think. So 20-year period to 15 years. 15 to 20 years is the shortest and the longest that these crisis periods last. But the things that they were saying that would happen, each crisis population is more connected. How should I say it? Each turning has sparks, and those sparks, they will set off like chain reactions. So ours was 2008 in the housing boom. That set off a chain reaction, Occupy Wall Street. And then from there, people start going into their own kind of awakening in some ways. But then they said in chapter 6, by 2020, this fourth turning will be at its peak. And this crisis period is typically, it's marked by, it'll probably start with a financial event that will spark the crisis. Secession from nation will be talked about. Many states will talk about seceding from the nation. A potential of a terrorist group maybe blowing up an aircraft. Mind you, they wrote this prior to 97. They published it in 97. They said, but a potential terrorist group may blow up an aircraft and claim to have portable weapons of mass destructions. This is the words that they were using. The U.S. strikes the responsible country preemptively. Some blame the president for concocting the attack, so a false flag. Remind you of something?
Yeah.
Militia groups will rise up against urban factions, and there will be cyber attacks. The CDC may announce the spread of a novel virus that will reach densely populated areas. Mandatory quarantine. The president may order National Guard into the cities. All of this has happened so far.
Yep.
Urban gangs, again, battle suburban militias. You know, the rising of, you know, the left-right factions. And calls mount for the president to declare martial law. Insurrection is a word that you'll hear. And all events will escalate towards the climax. And the climax will be somewhere around 2020 to 2023, 2025. Now they're saying it could last all the way to 2030. And this is
time,
right? 2030, sustainable development, agenda 2030.
Yep.
This idea, and here's the thing. The point of a crisis is to move it back into a high. So if you look 80 to 90 years ago, you'll be smack dab in the middle of World War II and the Great Depression, when the New Deal came out. Right. And that kind of changed a lot about our economic system. So the New Deal with FDR. And now we're talking about the Green New Deal. And so if you go back before that, 80 to 90 years, Civil War. If you go back before that, 80, 90 years, Revolutionary War. 80, 90 years before that, it was in the UK, and it was called the Glorious Revolution. And that was in Europe, not just the UK. And that all these crisis periods, they always have certain things that they always appear. The most dominant weapons of war, the most sophisticated dominant weapons of war are utilized. So the atomic bomb ended the last crisis period. Another interesting thing is so what happens in a crisis period is every spark does something archetypally to the children and the people that are in that period. A spark, some inciting incident, will turn into action during a crisis period. A spark during a high period will turn into a congealing of rhetoric and wanting for us all to come together under a new form of whatever. Like, we need to do something to end this crisis period. Mind you, we're talking 80 to 90 year cycles. So most people are dead that experienced the last crisis. So nobody's here with any wisdom to talk about it. And there are people who say this goes all the way back to the Etruscans pre-Rome, these 80 to 90 year cycles. They called it the saeculum, which means a long life. That's the sign of a good long life. So the interesting thing is the end of the last high was what sparked the awakening, which was, if you go on Wikipedia and you say the fourth turning, what ended the last high, you'll see that it says in there the death of JFK in there. You know, so that marked the turning. So there's all these archetypal huge events that seem to happen almost, I don't know, cosmologically, astrologically, like very ordained clockwork. And so what we're dealing with here, why aren't we seeing massive annihilation? You know, we have so many nuclear warheads, we could annihilate people. If this is correct, that the most advanced weapons of war are used in these crisis periods, what could this advanced weaponry be if we're not seeing people being exploded?
Space technology.
Space technology is one. Another one, psychological and cyber warfare.
Yeah, psychological warfare. 100%.
You don't need to kill everyone if you get everyone to accept what's happening on the planet, on planet Earth. If you get, and what I think is happening, there was William Casey back in the early 80s, who was the CIA director, who said, we will know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the American public believes is false. So now go back to this thing that CBSN bots on Twitter. An estimated 2/3 of tweeted links to popular websites are posted by automated accounts, not human beings. Our opinions about what other people in the world are saying, 2/3 of them on Twitter are generated by AI.
Yep.
So when we go on and we see all the comments and we're thinking, oh man, this is how people think. No, it's not.
So
2/3 of it is not how humans think.
do you know what Defeat Disinfo was? Have you ever heard of this group?
I've heard of, but refresh my memory.
So Defeat Disinfo was a campaign that was launched by former General McChrystal, okay, the same one that got Hastings, had Hastings killed, right? Because he threw him under the bus. And so basically what it was is that the DARPA-derived artificial intelligence that basically gets implemented into social media. So Defeat Disinfo worked with the Democrats this last election. And what they did is they found all their blue checkmark influencers on every single platform, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. And the artificial intelligence took over their accounts. And anytime that it detected a big account on the opposition was posting something, it would do a counter narrative with multiple spamming blue checkmark accounts, changing the narrative for everybody to see instantaneously, whether it was true or not. That happened in 2020, and it's probably still happening right now.
This is what proves to me that, like, you know, when we talk about conspiracy, like, a lot of people, they're so afraid of that term. And I'm just like, you can call me whatever you want, but guess what? I'm just gonna point out what seems the most practical. And I'm not going to overtly try to throw people under the bus, nor am I going to come with this buggy-eyed, like, we need to lynch these people in the streets. No, I think the solution becomes inherent and it emerges naturally when we start engaging with the solution on an internal level. But, you know, when it really comes to what's been happening online lately, it has to, the whole thing is, it has to really hijack the way that we think and what we think the conversations are. So it has to reframe the question. So, like, imagine what's the biggest debate that you see out there right now? The biggest, most hottest, most like lively debate.
Critical race theory.
Okay, so critical race theory. What it'll do is it'll frame it in a certain way. It'll say that, you know, okay, what's one of the core tenets that seems to be used about critical race theory?
Well, see, that's the thing, is in the model, okay, that is being perpetuated in the media, they don't talk about the actual theoretical model. Now, the theoretical model we know was developed Harvard Law School, was utilized as an analogy to explain basically racial persecutions, right? And this was modeled and now put out to other colleges, and then colleges into high schools, and high schools now into elementary schools. So people are coming forth and saying, hey, look, why are you teaching my children predominantly that white people are bad, that systemic racism is real, and that white people are the cause of it, and therefore white people live with this guilt that they don't even know about. Whether they're racist or not, they're racist by default simply because systemic racism is real. So that's kind of like the undertone.
So I mean, just take what happened over the past couple years. Everyone starts calling the previous commander-in-chief racist. He's on the right. There's more conservative and also religious and preserved old styles. And then there's this progressive side that's like, eradicate the old sacred things, you know, like blast apart all these old dogmas. Let's start leveling the playing field. And there's other theories, you know, that, you know, behind like what a lot of, we're glorifying, like, you know, if you're talking about, I don't know, busting on people's look, right? You know, we should be able to dress and look and say what gender, you know, we should be able to say whatever we are and whatever we want. And in a sense, like, this tolerance is like, okay, you want to be the way you want to be, okay. But then there's this forced tolerance and forced guilt that's out there. And so if you frame it in a certain way, then it's always going to be about, are you racist and intolerant and sexist and, you know, homophobic, or are you tolerant? Because you're either one or the other. So if you frame it like that, then all you got to do is every news article, every new YouTube thing, what is the title going to be? It's something that frames the argument as you're either this or you're that.
It's labeled
There's
society.
no such, or you're a conspiracy theorist. If you found another way to explain it, you're a conspiracy theorist. Because that's it. You either agree that it's a left-right thing, or you're a conspiracy theorist, or you're just you just reject it outright and you're a nihilist, anti-establishment, whatever. There's all these categories for us. So that has predominantly, when we're talking about like, you know, Max Egan and all these other people that are just framing it differently. Like, what if history actually worked a little bit differently? Or what if it's not, what if the whole thing about this left-right paradigm is a trap to get us on a hamster wheel where we're always fighting the latest, you know, enemy du jour, the enemy of the day. Like, you know, whose head's on the chopping block? Who are we going to be talking about today? It was Fauci for a while. Then it was Gates for a while, right? Him and Melinda are splitting up. Oh, let's talk about it. You know,
it's almost too like, what do you care about the most? All right, let's fight about that.
Right? Let's fight, right? And that's the bottom line. Let's fight. Yeah. You know, even like with Biden, and I have to call this out. Does it seem to any of you that this whole, his mental cognition is declining, that it seems a little staged, that it almost seems like a little like, whoa, really? Like, not that he was too with it in the campaign trail, but now it's just like, it's almost like it's made it too easy to start seeing that there's this cognitive decline. Like every video out there is almost like,
but
how
is
could
that,
you?
Is that being framed by the media for a specific reason? Is it being spotlighted now more than ever because they're getting ready to swap-a-roo, right?
Right.
Kami Kamala is going to come in.
You know, and well, that's actually exactly, you know, I realized where my train of thought hopped off before.
Yeah. Is
like, even the ways that, like, you were talking about, like, hijacking narratives. If I have something I want to tell you guys that I learned, and it's as factual as it can get because I have like my own, you know, insiders, and I've verified it even from the horse's mouth, and I have all that stuff going on. How do you hijack that conversation? How do you make that into even more of a ridiculous thing to believe? If it's true and it might get out and you're scared that the word might get out, how do you hijack that and divert it? What is something that you guys would do? And then imagine that like the powers that be with their predictive analytics are 100,000 steps ahead of you guys. What would you do if there was a real conspiracy, but it needed to be hijacked and covered up in the best way?
So what you do is you bring about emotional claims. Is you attach emotion to it, because most people who are looking into the world of conspiracy, 99.9% of every conspiracy is completely false. There's about 1% of actual information in there that is pertinent and true and real, that is verifiable, and we kind of move on tangents on that, but we get emotionally involved. If you look at all the conspiracies over the last 50 years, every single one of them is massively emotionally involved. And you attach emotion to some cornerstone in society that is emotionally attached, like theology, religion, belief systems. And you take those two and then you press them to the point where you want to push that narrative. It's really that simple.
Or,
psychological warfare.
I was thinking reverse psychology.
Okay.
Well, I mean, all of the above. So right. All of the above. And again, 10,000 other ways into hijacking a narrative. So like, let's say I were to want to say that there's this, I don't know, there's this banking conspiracy, right? And it's, you know, it's quite old.
Those
there's
guys
this
are
banking
good.
Conspiracy. I know, they're all good. But
let's use a real example.
If you wanted to make it seem ridiculous, then you start adding on, well, what do people who believe the banking thing also believe? Well, go to the most outlandish, and I'm not saying that any of these things are outlandish, but like let's say like so adrenochrome, you know, you go to the, I mean, and I'm not even saying that stuff is not feasible. What I am saying is you find something extreme and you attach it to the thing that's not that extreme. Like, you know, wealthy people coming together to figure out how to accumulate more of their wealth and more resources so they have an edge on the market and they don't lose their power. It's so hard to believe. No, it's actually not that hard to believe. How do you make it hard to believe for people? You say that they're also doing the most heinous thing there. And I'm not saying, like, again, because some of the things I'm going to say, like, might actually also be true, but shape-shifting reptilians, or like these people also believe that we come from insectoid ants that live under in these subterranean habitats that were the deep underground military bases. I've heard it all.
Or just
and
they're
so,
very mean, bad people. You don't want to be anywhere near them.
So you do the logical fallacy thing.
Ooh.
You explode it out to one logical fallacy is you take a claim here, you explode it out to the most extreme representation of it, to extreme proportions. Like you blow it way out of proportion, and then you attack that as this, right? So it's like when you say, like, somebody in politics that you don't like, you just equate him to Stalin or Hitler, and it works. No matter what, it works. If you just claim that somebody knew Epstein, it works.
Yep.
Right? The thing is I may have met people that in 10 years, let's say my career keeps growing and then I go on to something else, and then to bury me, somebody that I've met and maybe took a picture with when I was in a band turns out to be, I don't know, even framed for running some whatever, like, illegal Ponzi scheme of, and they're like, Ben Stewart connected with the blah, blah, blah Ponzi
you're already
scheme.
Screwed. You're connected to Andy Dick. I mean, how it doesn't get any worse than that.
I think that's my only redeeming quality, actually, is the Andy Dick thing.
So they go and they do all these things to discredit that movement, if you will, right? Whatever it may be.
Right. So another logical fallacy is, real quick, I'll let you get on with that. Another logical fallacy is I make an argument and you attack my character. You don't talk about the logic, you attack the character. Aren't you the commie that did the blah, blah, blah 10 years ago? It's just like, I'm talking about this right now.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I think when it gets to the next level, if it gets to the next level of extremism, they also start to dehumanize each other, where the victim becomes a rat, or the victim becomes, like in the 1940s in Japan, when they were doing human experimentation, they called them lumber. They called them logs, the experiments. We saw the same thing at the same time period in Germany.
Yep.
Totally. And so this is all, I think there's also something, I look at it in many different spheres, so I look at the conventional sphere as being this, and then you have the periphery outside is the stuff that most people don't look at. So the people who aren't looking for truth, they're looking for safety in numbers. They will just believe whatever the mob that's in control tells them to believe. And they will have enough excuses in their head to make it seem like, well, I'm going to argue against these people, not because I believe it on a fundamental level, but because the fact that they're telling me I'm being duped is reminding me that I'm not safe, and I want to feel safe. I'd rather feel safe even if I'm not safe, because then I would die at least, not, in anxiety. And so that's kind of like, and then outside of that, it's beyond the conspiracy. It's beyond the organization of mere humans. It's this epiphenomena that I really do believe that we are all connected fundamentally by an underlying fabric of reality, and that we actually do influence one another in ways that science has not quantified yet, or not publicly quantified yet, and ridicules as being anywhere like that's pseudoscience. It's all ridiculed. And so that's that other sphere.
I was going to say that's the same concept that we're talking about. It's the same tactic, just in the realm of academia, because that's what happens. Is we're having Dean Radin's going to be on next month.
Dean is amazing. Yeah,
and we're going to be talking about a lot of these things that you're kind of like mentioning right now. And he has just been highly criticized. In fact, him, Rupert Sheldrake, all these guys, highly attacked by academia. Because, and this is what they do, is they take what's out there and they push it back onto them and say, well, look at this, well, you're wrong because this and this. And they don't allow for that expansion of the mind to learn. You mentioned ahas and epiphanies earlier.
Yeah.
I have this thing here at the Redpill Project, and I say that evolution, growth, only happens when you have an epiphany or an aha moment. And that only occurs when you learn something that you did not know that you did not know. If you're in a continuous state of learning things that you already know, you're not growing spiritually, physically, or mentally. It only occurs when you have an epiphany or an aha moment, when you learn something that you did not know. And it is the progressive point of consciousness, is to expand into that realm of what you do not know that you do not know. And if you look at it, our emotions, we have two fundamental emotions. You're either moving towards happiness, love, or moving away from fear. And they align directly with learning something that you did not know you did not know. Fear is that which is undefined, that what you do not know that you do not know. And happiness is that what you're comfortable in knowing, that which you're comfortable in that state. And so I look at it in that perspective, and it's like science is the antithesis of this. Politicians are the antithesis of this. They only want to establish what they want, and that is already established within the doctrine of their belief systems.
Totally.
It's like this cult of humanity, of mind. It's this thing that the mind does, and now it's manifesting on a conscious level.
Ooh, you took the words out of my mouth, because like this really is something that's manifesting in ways that most of us don't realize we do have impact over on that subtler level that does connect us with external phenomena. Reality is not what any of us understand, but those of us with an open mind that are on the path to discovering it inwardly and outwardly and balancing the two are in a much better position to realize that we are the most powerful technology to creation, and we haven't even scratched the surface of our own human potential. So the number one weapon of war today is something that would help disempower our belief in ourselves. And so it's got us so focused on the outside world. Now catch this, like what is science? I think science is an aspect of consciousness, the same as art, the same as religion, and the same as philosophy. And I have specific ways of describing that. But then there's institutions, which are those things when people come together in large groups. There's the science institution.
Yeah, it's
Dogma comes in there.
Externalization. And
that's always, those institutions build around power. They get more power. And, whereas back in the day, a couple hundred years ago, according to our history, religion was the dominant power.
Right.
And small groups of people would say, I have the inside scoop on what God says, and I'll enforce it over all of you.
Yep.
Now, what do you have today? I have the inside scoop over what science says. And now they barely say science. They say data.
Yeah.
We have the data. And it's true. They have a lot more data than we do, and that needs to be contended with. But the number one thing that happens is, don't trust this is basically, if you look at what media is, we, your humble servant, are going to show you all the bad guys because you need to know about it. You, the audience, you're the victim. You're being screwed. You, the freedom-loving victim, are being screwed by these people. And we're going to tell you exactly how they're doing it and how to hate them and what we need to do, right? And so then on top of that, the underlying story is, you're the victim and we're going to help, and legislation is going to help, and authority is going to help, and institutions of power are going to help. Don't trust your instinct. You don't know about health. We're going to tell you about health. We'll even have a computer guy tell you about health, right? We'll have a computer guy telling you what countries need to do. And this, Operation Warp Speed, let's just get it inside you thing that's going on. So when you're looking at science today, it's basically data. And there's enough out there that's basically saying that data is useless without a way to frame it.
100%.
Data is useless without a way to frame it. So I just want to finish this one thought.
No, you're awesome. This is awesome. Go.
Because the way to disempower billions and billions of people is, you make them believe that we are insignificant in the universe, that we could be wiped out by a meteor and the rest of creation won't even bat an eye, that we are insignificant, that our lives are insignificant. We are just one of billions of people among trillions of, galaxies. We're so insignificant. Don't even worry about it. And, you know, but by the way, we have the inside scoop on the food that you should put inside your body, the medicine you should put inside your body, the thoughts that should be going on inside your head when they're fed to you, right? And you go to the store and all your food and toys are in predictable locations. Eventually Amazon's going to have predictive shipping, and it knows when you're out of coffee, and it'll just ship it to your house anyway. And if less than 15% is returned, they still make their profit. Eventually it's going to be shipped to you by these little roving drones or flying drones straight to your door. You won't even have to leave. In the spatial web, you just put on your goggles. Why go to the dirty Yellowstone National Park where you could get like bit by mosquitoes, attacked by Bigfoot? Just stay in your house, put on these goggles, we'll put on a haptic suit. You'll feel like you're there. This is how you disempower people. You cut them off from nature. You cut them off from creation. You cut them off from their history. You tell them a false line of what history is. You give them false science. You make them believe that we're insignificant, we're powerless, that we're being fed misinformation, only trust authority and the major news media outlets. And the number one thing that's under attack, no matter what you believe, is trust.
That's it.
Is the number one thing that's being attacked is trust. Because whether you're on the left, you're on the right, you're in conspiracy, or you're somebody that's trying to stay the hell out of it, nobody trusts anything anymore. People who watch the news, in probably 2/3 of them, by statistics that I saw just 2 years ago, probably 2/3 of people who watch the news don't even fully trust all the news stations that they watch. And the thing is news isn't about giving you information. It's about loading it with subtext. And that subtext is, here's what's worth talking about, and everything else is crazy, or we're just not going to mention it. And by the way, we're going to give you these news anchors that, let's say when they're talking about ayahuasca, you know, it's like people are in droves are going down to the Amazon drinking some magical mystery brew. In other news, you know, like, you know, so
5 of them died.
Tilts and, right. You know, right. 5 of them died. So you're not going to talk about the 2 million that received such great benefit that they got off their, maybe not 2 million that got off meds, but that didn't commit suicide. All the vets that haven't committed suicide, that got off their opioids. You don't mention any of that. You mention the most horrific. And that's what news is. We're going to tell you the small percentage of the most horrific stuff that's going on in the world. So your amygdala will start sending you testosterone and cortisol. So you stay in your house and you purchase in very predictable fashions. Because when you're in fear, your behavior and your purchasing patterns are extremely predictable. When you're open and you're creative, who knows what you might buy? And that's scary. So let's be safe here. Let's be safe. Number one thing about the media is we're not going to tell you how to be healthy. We're not going to tell you that the number one things that's killing people is the way we move, the way we eat, and also how much anxiety we have based upon how little or lack thereof the attention that we give to our family and how much of a social life we have. Never mentioned. What are their health suggestions? We won't talk about the main one that's being debated right now, which is, you know, the pat on the arm. But they'll say, cover your face up. Don't go around other human beings. Stay indoors.
Trust your medical professionals.
10 years ago, that's exactly the opposite. Your doctors would be like, are you getting out and getting enough movement?
Get
and
some
are you
fresh air, get some orange juice in ya.
Talk some friends,
lots
you know
of
what I
fluids,
mean?
Get out there and walk.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go out and have a good time with your friends. Now it's like, don't have any good times with your friends. Stay far apart. Cover up your face. You don't want them seeing your facial expressions. That's a bad part of communication, right? You know, you can do it on the phone and you can FaceTime. Why be in reach of people?
Well, you know, you nailed it when you said this is trust. So you actually, I don't know if you realize it, you came full circle from when we were beginning this talk. Remember we were talking about the welcome to the machine, right? The technology infrastructure that's being built around us and how it's mimicking various aspects of our universe that's already out there, right? Things that already happen in the universe. Well, guess what? We live in a trust-based universe. The universe, you develop a relationship spiritually. I'm a spiritual guy. What I've learned in my experience through many of my psychedelic adventures is that the universe tests you throughout your life. It gives you little things. It sees if it can trust you just a little bit more. And when it trusts you, it gives you a little bit more responsibility. It allows these thoughts to go out there and influence it just a little bit better, a little bit easier, a little bit more in an optimized way. It's a trust-based universe. What they're doing is replacing that system of you interacting with your environment, you interacting with your universe, instead of you interacting with directly them. Them is the new God of which you have to develop trust through.
And, just there was this awesome book called The Human Brand. Way back, only a few years back. But basically what they were saying was that brands, when you see like the double arches of McDonald's and stuff like that, it reaches into a part of your brain and your cognition that goes all the way back to when we were in tribes wandering through nature, and we would come across an animal or a tribe. The first thing that has to happen inside your brain, that has to happen instantly, is are these people or that creature's intentions, and how capable are they of carrying out, because if you see a creature and it's trying to kill you, but it's a mouse, right? Then it's not as scary. So you need to have that judgment. If you see a huge creature, a moose or something like that, but it's just kind of carrying on about its own way, then you don't worry. So you identify what are its intentions and how capable is it. We do the same thing with brands all the way to today. And so that happens instantaneously inside of us all the time, and we're always making those assessments. But we used to do that evolutionarily. We are hardwired through hundreds of thousands of years of doing that by looking into nature.
Yep.
Now, how do we do that? We watch the news, mostly on our phone. That's how we gauge how safe we are in the world. So we're hearing about stuff in other countries, and it's doing to us what would happen 100,000 years ago when we would see, a cantankerous woolly mammoth, a bear maybe that has its cubs around. That's what's happening inside of us physiologically when we're watching the news, but it's filtered through this device. So we're not gauging our safety, our trust level. How much do we trust that we're safe? Because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first thing, we need food and shelter. Then we need to feel safe. Right. And then if we don't feel safe, we can't get to the next level, which is collaborative, community, creative. We can't get to that level. So if you don't want humans to be creative, you keep them in the amygdala. You keep tantalizing it with coffee, with stimulants, with certain kinds of news that's constantly making people feel like I can't trust the world that we are living in.
Yep.
So if you guys there's a Disney film, and I'm always very curious to see what kind of messages are put in some Disney films, but it was called Raya, the Last Dragon.
Okay.
And the whole thing is about trust. And without giving away the film, it's just basically there used to be one united kingdom called Kumandra, and there were dragons. And then there was this droon, sounds like drones, but the droon is just this mindless force that just turns people into stone. Okay. And the dragons fought them off, but most of them all died and everything. But anyway, what happened was there was this dragon gem left over, and it broke into pieces. And all the warring nations, because now they're warring, they had a piece of it. But the whole point of it is they needed to come back together and trust one another, not fight one another, but trust one another and put it back together, trusting that one won't steal it and have all the power. So by the end, one person from each of these tribes has to trust and hand over their piece to the least trusted tribe, right? And so they do it, and it works, right? So the whole concept is, can we trust what's happening? And I do believe we need to work on trust, but a lot of the balancing point is, are you giving away your trust? Because my thing is if I get screwed over by somebody and somebody says why did you trust that person? There's actually something internal that it's not about getting screwed over or not. When you trust somebody, you choose to give your trust to somebody, and then they screw you over. There's still this righteous part of your soul that knows, I gave you the opportunity to do the right thing, though.
Yeah.
You know, there's that aspect that it's humbling. But, you know, the bottom line is I also have trust in my discernment to know how much risk am I going to allow this person to take. You know, I've never met them. They seem nice, but they want $10,000 to start a business. In what kind of position would that put me? That's discernment. Let's just be honest. Trust has a lot to do with how much do you trust yourself. But again, everything about trust is being pointed back outwards. So I think the grand solution to all of this, because I always love at least getting into the solutions once in a podcast. Fantastic. The grand solution to me is stop waiting for something outside of us to give us the answer, but look to the outside world to help give us examples of how we can discover it within. And this is one thing that I'm noticing, that we're not given very many examples out there of how to live as if we have our discernment, we have trust, we have love, we're willing to let people into our circle. We're even willing to let them have the opportunity to violate us, just so they also see that, yeah, I see who you are, but I'm going to allow you slightly deeper into this inner circle, because I want you to know that there's this opportunity in this space that I'm holding for you to do the right thing. And what I think happens, here's my prediction of the future. I think that, you know, the same Chinese character for crisis is used for their concept of opportunity. Mm-hmm. Crisis and opportunity are the same Chinese character.
No kidding.
Yeah. So when you look at that, inherent within all crisis is opportunity. You can't separate one from the other. Just like inherent light implies its counterpart, darkness, in order for there to be contrast and division. So we look at division as like, I hate division. Like, no, division is how you have sports. Division is how you have music. Division is how you just see the beauty and the splendor of the dynamics of life. So everything that we say, like, you know, yeah, but rules suck. Okay, yeah, but rules are also inherent in all things, in relationships, in sports, in computers, in technology. We make things out to seem like it's terrible, but really what's happening right now is the world has an opportunity. They have all the opportunity in the world too, to realize that what is happening is causing for us to trust more in ourselves, to refine our blades of discernment, to be able to acknowledge that we have the ability to change things en masse. And if we start trusting that the right thing is going to start happening, and act as if, not like we're fools and we're just giving the opportunity for people to completely screw us over, but with right discernment, we are showing our cards. We are saying, you know what? I believe that we are only seeing the negative at the very top because that's what news has been built to do. They're not here to tell us all the good stuff or all the good people that are sleeper cells that are waiting, all the billionaires that are like, yeah, I see the Great Reset coming and I see a lot of really crappy stuff that I don't agree with, but guess what? I don't feel safe sticking my neck out and risking this big, you know, dynasty that I've built, because I don't see enough examples of people who would be my support base. So that's why people like all of us, we need to start using our voices and being like, guess what? I see the writing on the wall and I choose love. I choose discernment. And I also know, like, I am not above calling out specific institutions with love, not with how can we lynch you? How can we, you know, bring you to justice? But I see you. I see the plan clearly, and I'm not going to be complicit. However, once we have neutralized your ability to harm, then we're all good. It's just rehabilitation from there. So that's what I think the solution is.
That's freaking awesome, man.
Well, and I think you're spot on. I think what's going to come out of this is I've always told people we do kind of like a different type of podcast during the week, but with everything that we're seeing unfold here, with the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, the New World Order, and the Biden administration, and V fraud, and vaccine, and all this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Is that there's multiple paths that the world can go down. None of them are all set in stone. And the more people that awaken up, we were talking about it yesterday, there's over 100 different protests worldwide, anti-V word protests worldwide, that are being propagated here in the United States as being told, because there's not enough COVID vaccines, they're out there. No, that's not what's... We got the people here in our group that are from these places that are telling us what's really happening. And so I think that it's what I call the Bannister effect. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, right? And after that, they said that it couldn't have been done. Nobody can do it. Your heart will explode. All of a sudden, he does it, and millions of people from that point begin to do it. It's this thing that happens within consciousness. It's this seed that is planted and the flower starts to bloom. Once the seed of freedom is revitalized, once that seed of awakening occurs, it's going to blossom and they can't stop it. Their system will have to mold around the consent and the power of the people. And as long as we keep on doing what we're doing, it's going to happen.
Yeah. Keep on doing what we're doing, and also show that our path is filled with a self-correcting mechanism, that we are aware of biases, we are aware of apophenia, and apophenia is putting patterns together in ways that potentially reality, if reality is one thing, which I don't believe it is, putting patterns together that don't belong together. Like, imagine a huge connect the dots, but you're not doing it the right dot to the next right dot. You can paint or create an image that wasn't supposed to be created out of those dots. So it's data points, and the way you connect it is the way you frame it. So in that respect, the way that we like apophenia is you're seeing the dots connected in the wrong way. And what I kind of believe is that you flip that on its head, because everyone would say like, you're wrong about your theory about the world. You're wrong about that because the pattern actually fits together this way. And what I would say is we're too focused on trying to prove that there's one singular external fixed immovable reality, that we're disempowering what the whole purpose of being able to see things from a different perspective is. We each have our unique perspective and our own unique gift and genius. And so that means when we're able to see outside of some supposed fixed external reality, that we are co-creators of that reality, and that we are meant to have touch with our gift and connect it with a shared hallucination that is the consensus reality. Because I'm not saying that like there is no fixed reality outside. It's just not as fixed as you think it is. Rupert Sheldrake even said, I think these things that we're calling fixed immovable laws of the universe are more like habits. Potentially they can break. We just don't see it on such short timelines.
As above, so below. It has to be. If you think about the dynamic of the human creature, it's just a replication of nature, and nature's a replication of the predominant universe, as above, so below. And so I don't believe that there is any immutable laws, or I think that all laws are ever changing, are ever evolving. And it's interesting that you say this, because this is what I talk about in The Truth, is that there is only two truths. Now bear with me here. There's only two truths. There's the absolute truth. This is totality. It's unknowable. You can't imagine it. You can't understand it, and you never will. Nobody ever will, because it is absolute. Only absolute and totality can understand it. But all we can do is have a perception, an understanding, a self-evident realization of that truth. And every single one of us is going to have a self-evident realization of that truth. And if we go to the Aborigines, the originals, right? And we say that, their belief is that the sky is carried on the back of a turtle. That's their belief, and who am I to say that that's wrong? Because in their mind, that is their self-evident realization of the absolute. And mine saying is that there's a field, and this field encapsulates everything. Well, they would say, well, we're saying the same thing. We're just explaining it a little bit differently. And that's the absolute truth, is that there is no absolutism when it comes to conscious reality in the sense of how we perceive truth. Instead, we all have a piece of the puzzle, and we're all looking at it from different vantage points and perspectives. We should come together and bring those together, string the pearls together to form the greater picture.
It doesn't serve us to have one fixed external reality, because if you think about that, again, that's the disempowering thing.
Yeah.
That's, we are subject and we are imprisoned by a reality that we didn't create and we barely have influence on. We're just insignificant little blips. We'll be dead in the blink of an eye according to evolutionary time. Don't worry about it. Again, it's more disempowering. It would be a complete flipping on its head if you were to say, listen, all that stuff that the big institutions are saying, we have the science, we have the inside scoop, we are the only ones who knows how to take care of this big old problem. And so no wonder it goes back to the, for this whole concept that could an institution be so insidious that it would create a problem and then provide a solution to it that steps people in the direction of where they want it. Absolutely. Yes, when it's disempowering. Yes, it's all disempowering. And the thing is when there's this external world and you have to know, like, maybe the indigenous who believe that the sky rides on the back of a turtle is empowering in a way that we can't wrap our heads around. It makes sense in a way, and it actually gives credence to a deeper knowing of who we are by believing it. Is it right? Is it wrong? Well, what does that mean when there's not one fixed, immovable external reality? What does right and wrong actually mean? I think it means, are you authentically living by what your inner direction, some say soul, some say purpose and mission in life, are you living your mission? That is a truth that is not given to you. It is discovered, it's refined, it's made day in and day out, action and behavior by action and behavior. So that's what I'm super excited about, because the answer is accessible to every single one of us. It's not like, I still have so many people being like, Ben, there's an avenue to change things. Just follow the political, bark up the chain of command in the given political system. They'll listen. I've had people say, like, they will listen. And I'm like, you don't really understand what they really even implies and how much of a waste of time most of that actually is. And it's a machine to do something different than you thought it was.
Right.
Like, the machine of government was not built to do anything other than manage, surveil, and create or serve as the mechanism for a Ponzi scheme. It only does one thing. No economic system in history has ever caused for wealth to trickle down the mountain. It always goes up the mountain, resources up the mountain, smaller, fewer hands. So this is just something that humans do. And to put it back in our hands, we don't need technology in our hands. We don't need something external, nor do we need information from our phones or the outside world that we don't inherently have access to from our human body. We don't need anything other than that to empower ourselves. So the thing is what were we gifted with? You got to break it down into its simplest core elements. What were we gifted with that no one can take away from us? Our voice, our mind, right? Our artistry, our ingenuity,
creativity or imagination, that
compassion,
single spark inside of us, our level of gratitude and love and appreciation that we give towards things,
right?
Our emotional exchange, the relationships we create, but most importantly, I think, is our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah. And so here's just the bookend on all of that. Those internal practices are far more powerful than we'll ever be told. We're led to believe that sitting and meditating or visualizing and having some kind of spiritual discipline and things like community and sharpening the blade of our own discernment, getting in touch with what intuition is, because intuition, you can have a relationship with it. Intuition knows when you believe it or not, believe it or not, right? Your intuition will actually open up the more you trust it, and it'll give you more opportunities. It'll like speak more in its own language to see if you know how to decode its language. And so the most important thing about all of this is those practices that are inherent within having a human, right? If you have a voice, if you have a mind, if you have a heart and compassion, those practices are far more powerful than anything external. The one reason why it's not being used as such is because we are living currently inside of a system where we have outsourced our, like, tell me who I am phone, tell me what my potential is phone, come on Google, tell me what a human being is capable of. You probably will never hear of people like Daniel Kish, who went blind at the age of 5 and taught himself to echolocate. And now he can ride a bike. He can see around corners by just clicking his mouth, right? There are people like Wim Hof swimming in freezing ice cold Arctic water, where people were like, you're going to have a heart attack, you're going to kill yourself. No, actually, he's become one of the healthiest people in the world that can get injected with E. coli, as well as 12 of his students, and just breathe a certain breath for 30 minutes. And guess what? No effects whatsoever. When the control group, who didn't do the breathing technique, convulsing, eye vision going white or black, fever, nausea, massive symptoms. What's the difference? Just augmenting your breath for a couple of minutes? You kidding me? Like, we don't know about this. We don't know that augmenting your breath for a couple minutes can eradicate the effects of E. coli that's injected directly into your system. We don't know that there's a person out there who's not special genetically, who just learned how to echolocate by listening and repurposing the visual part, the visual cortex, repurposing that to use auditory inputs to create a 3D map of the world. You guys ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, that whole series? The Earthbender, Toph, the one who could feel vibrations in the earth and see a 3-dimensional picture of what's going on around her, even though she's blind, right? That's what this guy did. You tell, like, come on. We're human beings. You have, every one of us here, we have a human body, and we barely know what it does. And we're so enthralled by all this technology. We barely have examples of how incredible the human body is. We have tons of examples of how incredible scientific breakthroughs in medicine, and take this pill or take that shot, or, live this lifestyle. We have all these protocols that science can give us, and we don't even know what this thing that we're given does, and what breath can do, what focusing the mind can do. Here's to answer, a question about what does the future look like in the terms of technology. I foresee that inadvertently technology is going to also help us realize on an accelerated timeline what the human being is capable of. So not only will we have cyborgs that can, they have an exoskeleton and they can lift 5,000 pounds and stuff like that, because there's actually support braces put inside their body on such a minute scale, but that they self-assemble, and this stuff is actually being worked on. So you can do superhuman things with technology. But I also believe that technology has the potential of pointing us back inwardly to show us that we have the potential to do far more than we were told. So you'll have this X-Men type thing where you'll have superhumans, and then you'll have cyborgs. And there will be an acceleration, but also a balancing. And that's the one thing about history. There always seems to be dark, but there always seems to be light. There always seems to be corruption, but there always seems to be compassion and goodness, and people coming together for the right reasons. It's like you can't eradicate either. So what I try and do is rehabilitate conspiracy theorists, because I come from that. And when I say rehabilitate, it's not to tell them, admit you were wrong so we can start getting you back into the conventional
I got
way
a
of thinking.
problem, sir.
Yeah. Well, admitting it is the first problem. Or it's the first sign of, you coming back into your sanity. We don't even know what sanity is. We really don't. So that's what I think is coming for us. I actually think, and I said this in an old talk in Australia back in 2011, and this is how all of my lyrics for my old band used to be. I would write lyrics and I'd be like, why did I write them? I don't even know what my lyrics mean. And then 5-10 years later, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. Mm-hmm. My last album, which is on Spotify, is called, the band is Hierosonic, Hierosonic. And the album is Consciousness, Fame, God, Money, Power. And it makes more sense today than it did when I wrote it, with the band, I should say. Back in 2010, 2011, we recorded it. And the same goes for that talk that I was saying. People were asking me, what do you think is going to happen in the future? What do you see as the biggest event that's going to happen in human history in the near future? And I said, I think humans are going to split into two species. Yep. And I didn't know what I meant back then. I didn't have the cognition to really understand that there's going to be a cyborgian split, a transhuman split, but that is going to push other people farther away from it. And they're going to be like, nah, I'm going to go the Daniel Kish, the Wim Hof, the Roger Bannister route, and I'm going to see what biology gave me. I'm going to see what God, what the universe, what the creator gave me, and I'm going to fast track that. I really do believe, and I'm okay with people saying there's no evidence to support this, because history is filled with evidence not to support what actually happens.
Right.
So I think we're going to have superhumans, not just because of technology, but I do think we're going to have superhumans. What does that mean? How far does that go? How fast the timeline? I don't know, but I think by 2030, we're going to start seeing more Wim Hofs and Daniel Kishes and Roger Bannisters out there that are able to spontaneously, heal people with their hands, heal themselves, live to 250 years old, living on nothing but rosemary and mint. Who knows? Yeah.
You said it best when you said that we have the greatest piece of technology on this planet right now is the human body, is us. Mm-hmm. And we sit here with these very rudimentary and elementary things that are produced that keep our attention away from who this is and what this is. And the process of external discovery starts within. That's the way I've always looked at it. If I want to know Ben, if I want to know Vince, I want to know Jason, I have to first know myself, because everything that I know within every single one of those people is a reflection of my own inner self. I cannot know anybody more than I know myself.
Yeah.
And so everything externally is internally known. And you can't know anything new unless you discover something new within here first.
Yeah. And there's something about, when we're talking technology, mind you, a guitar is a piece of technology. Yeah. A piano is. Now imagine that's an invention that happened once. And think of all the music that's come from a piano. That one invention. Yeah. And it hasn't changed. Like, little things have changed, but it's following the same notation spread, and you just the human body does different stuff with it. Mm-hmm. And then you can sing on top of it. Guitar, same thing. Imagine one invention that for ages afterwards goes into different genres, creates moves people, changes people's lives, probably keeps people from committing suicide. Right? These technologies have done a lot. Now you take a super sophisticated and changing and evolving technology, and I'm not going to say it's worse. Mm-hmm. What I am going to say is, in the initial stage of technology, so I was born in 83. A guitar was the same back then as it is today. Acoustics and electrics, maybe minor changes. Phones, radically different. Yeah. Radically different than when I was born, before the internet. Right, exactly. So the thing is we don't even know what technology is going to eventually do to us. We don't know what smartphones, like think back to a smartphone 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't even compare to these new phones. It doesn't even compare. So think in 20, 30 years, how the generations are going to be different. Children born into knowing nothing but this technology, because mind you, we're doing this podcast on technology. I make my films on technology. I can program music and do an entire film that'll be seen by millions of people on this laptop that I'm talking to you guys on. I can also do all my taxes. I can figure a bunch of equations out, whatever. This thing is so versatile. We barely have scratched the surface of what we can do with it. So as grows the surveillance and all the problems that we see with it, also grows the inner ingenuity inside us, because we couldn't conceive of piano music until it was invented.
That's right.
But piano music today is definitely different than piano music 100 years ago, right? Because we keep inventing new ways to use it
through creativity.
And so will the phones. So will AI. So will 5G, 6G, 7G, like whatever. As it starts to evolve, we assume, we see things on a bell curve. Like, here's the population. Right. It was steady until it hit the bell curve. And now, it's just going to keep going up until we're having 9 billion children every 2 seconds, right? No, these things are a wave. You look at life, it's cyclic, right? Eventually, in the same thing, there's an equation that shows that rabbit populations, they grow predictably, they level off, and then they taper off predictably. Mm-hmm. So there's like an equation that it kind of follows. Mind you, it's the same equation that is actually used for the Mandelbrot set, which is that fractal equation that allows you to zoom in and you keep seeing the same pattern over and over again. That equation is also used to see population growths and things along those lines.
Infinite replication within a finite space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly what the human is. Infinite possibility with what we perceive as being finite time, finite material, right? It's the same thing. Within a finite space, infinite amount of decisions and complexity can come out of that.
That's it.
And so I believe that the real awakening that everyone has been talking about for thousands of years through scripture, and now lately is more of like a mimetic engineering that's happening. Culture is also playing part in this. We are having this awakening, and this is what the awakening looks like. And I would have to say that ayahuasca, when you do a plant medicine and you do it in a let's say a container, and it doesn't have to be sacred as in cultural appropriation, wearing a feather in your hat and calling in the 4 directions. You don't have to do it that way, but if you do it in an intelligent container, ayahuasca will bring you to the lowest point you've ever been to. But it does it for a very specific reason. It's to show you all of your own fears and how they are disconnecting you from your potential, how you have developed a fear to keep you from even trying to go in the direction of one of your highest gifts that you were given. So Roger Bannister, what drove him to break this brick wall that the previous guy before him said, 4-minute mile, brick wall, it cannot be broken. I'm the guy who has gotten closest, and it is impossible. All the doctors say it, impossible. But then when one person does it, when Roger Bannister did it, it was like a month later that guy said, okay, I'm going to try it again. And he breaks it. And the next year there's 300 people. And then now there's,
Millions.
How many people who've done that, even teenagers that have done it. So what I'm saying is what's happening in the world is like the low of the ayahuasca journey.
Yep.
But it has to happen. And I think the awakening, this is what healing looks like. When people go through ayahuasca and they have that low moment, they're like, why did I say yes to this? Right? Internally, they're like, stop, please, can I make this stop? Because you're just being confronted with fear after guilt, after shame, after all these things we inflict upon ourselves. I think that's what's happening to the world. And it's the best opportunity we will ever get to wake people up to their own potential. And I do believe that as you wake people up, you also wake them up to their own inner dark and their own inner light.
100%.
Meaning our awakening is not just going to lead to kumbaya and rainbows. It's going to lead to new levels of awful, new levels of awesome, new levels of destruction, and new levels of compassion, community, and productivity. So the ratios may not change much. Yeah. We may just see this great fourth turning and the great reset that's upon us, the fourth industrial revolution. It's going to take on what you are expecting, because if you're only expecting there to be awful stuff, then you're only going to recognize the awful stuff that happens, right? If you're only expecting the awesome stuff, you're only going to see the awesome stuff, except for that little hint in there that you can't escape when you're only trying to look at the light. It's not like the dark's not there, and it's not like the dark's not influencing you, and vice versa. So I actually do believe we are in the midst of the greatest awakening humanity has ever and probably will for a long, long time experience.
100% agreed. Guys, Ben Joseph Stewart, he's just absolutely amazing. I love this guy. Ben, where can we find you? What you have coming up these days?
benjosephstewart.com. I'd encourage as many people as possible to go check out Waking Infinity News. So you just go to youtube.com/bychanceorfate, and you'll see Waking Infinity News. And I do deeper dives on my members section on benjosephstewart.com and on Patreon. For members only, stuff that I can't get into on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I have a film coming up, like I said, with Aubrey Marcus about darkness. And that's going to be a super amazing film. But yeah, find me on benjosephstewart.com. That's where all of my media is. And it's going to start spreading into other independent media platforms like Pete Evans's Evolve Network. There's Tim Pool's network, which he's got a big thing that's growing. I still do stuff with Gaia. Aubrey Marcus is blowing up with his media. So there's going to be a new revolution, I think, of media, independent media platforms. You guys are doing it very well. And I think we are finding one another, and we're going to lift each other up as well. So that's my great mission. Find me at benjosephstewart.com. Email me if you guys want to get involved, become a member. And yeah, just know that there are people out there that are on your side if you think that there's sides. They are in your camp if you think that we're all tribal and in camps, but that are looking for harmony is probably the greatest thing.
Yeah.
There are those that are looking for harmony that are really powerful. They have a lot of resources. They have a lot of clout. They have a lot of influence, and they're just not coming out because it's our job to set the stage and make sure that they feel comfortable sticking their neck out. And then all the pieces start clicking into place. So that's where you can find me. That's what my mission is. That's what I'll be doing until I drop.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Ben, you're freaking just phenomenal, man. We're definitely going to have you back here very, very shortly. And everybody else, Fringe After Dark, will be jumping on over there. Give us about 10 minutes, so about 9:55 my time. So 9:55 we'll be jumping on there. If you guys don't know what that is about, head over to redpills.tv. All that information is in there. You can find it all there if you need it. Much love, respect, God bless, take care. Ben, thank you, my friend. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Love y'all. Peace.